A time for reflection.
Sentence focus.
Line graphs. Our total sales have gone up for 3 consecutive months. Our total sales have gone down for 3 consecutive months. Interest in this product leveled off and remained stagnant for the next 3 months. In the 10th week, sales jumped sharply and hit a peak of 25,000 units. Bar charts. Motor sales in Europe have seen a significant gain since last April. There has been a drastic drop in sales in the West region from last year. Compared to last year, the South has shown great improvements. Pie charts. This pie chart shows you our market share in the U.S. Our current market share is 15%. Our products make up around 12% of the shoe market in Taiwan. 1. A weak start.
I like to begin by looking at the results for the first half of last year. This line graph demonstrates that we experienced dramatic fluctuations in sales during the first quarter.
Yes, that's quite apparent. What were the reasons for this volatility? Is this normal for that time of the year?
To some extent. However, a lot of it was because of the downturn in the economy. Looking at the graph, though, we can see that there was consistent growth during quarter 2.
Still, it's disappointing that, on the whole, sales fell beyond expectations during that time.
Two. Getting the point across.
I'd like to direct your attention to the next slide. In this graph, we can see sales picked up in the latter part of last year.
It's certainly reassuring to see that sales climbed steadily from July to September. Why did they level off after that?
That's normal, Lillian. We offer a lot of back-to-school promotions in the summer to prompt consumers to buy.
I see there was a spike again in December. I assume that's attributable to traditional Christmas buying?
You got it, Martin. That's precisely the reason.
Three. Year-on-year performance.
Let's move on to year-on-year performances of our international branches. Martin, can you start us off?
You can see from this bar chart that some branches have shown improvement. Others have experienced declines of up to 30%.
I see the Spanish office saw sluggish sales results compared to last year. How do you account for that?
The results are in direct proportion to our other European branches, actually. The drop is more noticeable there because the sales volume is typically the largest. It boils down to a lack of consumer confidence in Europe.
Four. Dividing up the pie.
At this point, I want to turn to a discussion of market share. Looking at this pie chart, you'll note there is room for improvement.
That's certainly true. I had expected our share to rise.
Me too. Our current share of the market is 14%. Some of our competitors are standing much stronger, with upwards of 20%.
Yes, it seems that Megamart has the biggest piece of the pie. It would be nice to steal a bit of their market share.
The question is how. It's easier said than done.
Unit 13. Explaining trends.
1. Upward and downward.
Noun phrase.
1. As this graph shows, there was an increase in orders after March.
2. As this graph shows, there was a decrease in orders after March. Verb phrase.
3. As this graph shows, orders increased after March.
4. As this graph shows, orders decreased after March. From, to.
5. From 2013 to 2014, there was an increase in expenditures of $10,000.
6. Total expenditures increased by $10,000 from 2013 to 2014.
7. From 2000 to 2014, there was a drop in foreign investment of about $2 million.
8. Foreign investment dropped by about $2 million from 2000 to 2014.
9. This graph shows a slide in revenue from $6 to $4 million in January.
10. Revenue slid from $6 million to $4 million in January, as you can see on the graph.
11. During March and April, there was a drop in the number of accounts from 45 to 37.
12. Between March and April, the number of accounts dropped from 45 to 37.
13. There was a 1% fall in revenue from $602.9 million a year ago to $596.4 million in the first quarter of this year.
14. The stock price rose to 73 cents from 70 cents a year ago. Of and by.
15. From 2012 to 2013, there was an increase in expenditures of $10,000.
Total expenditures increased by $10,000 from 2012 to 2013.
From 2000 to 2007, there was a rise in debt of almost $10,000.
From 2000 to 2007, debt rose by almost $10,000.
Track 80.
Before you hear the next part of the talk, you will have some time to look at questions 6 to 8. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 8.
Because we want our employees to be happy, we carried out a survey recently to find out which working patterns are really most popular. In general, our staff prefer to work at the office. In fact, nearly half come in during regular office hours, from 9 to 5. Anyway, we also asked about part-time work, working from home, and another option, job sharing. Job sharing is a kind of part-time work where two people share the responsibilities for one full-time job. Anyway, we found that only 5% of our staff wanted to share a job, so it's not very popular on the whole. But when it comes to working part-time, we were surprised to find that 27% of our employees would actually prefer it. That's a very high number, really, over a quarter of the staff. And then it was interesting to see that quite a lot of our staff, 20% in fact, would like to work from home.
Track 81.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you will have some time to look at questions 9 and 10. Listen carefully and answer questions 9 and 10.
I'd like to give you an example of the kind of person who benefits most from our family-friendly policy. Sally is one of our assistants in accounting who has 2 small children. Sally's husband travels abroad a lot, so she has to look after the children on her own most of the time. Both the children go to a nursery early in the morning. So we've agreed that Sally can come in at 8 o'clock after she leaves the children. At lunchtime, Sally's sister picks the children up from the nursery. But she has to go to work herself at 3 o'clock. So Sally leaves the office at 2 to collect the children from her sisters. And she makes up the extra time by finishing her work at home.
That is the end of part 2. In the exam, you'll have half a minute to check your answers.
Listening 5.4. You will hear a university lecturer discussing car ownership in different countries. Before you listen, you have some time to look at questions 13 to 16. Now, as you listen, answer questions 13 to 16.
Car ownership has changed quite dramatically in all age groups across most countries, but particularly in those countries that have experienced a sudden growth in wealth. Australia has one of the highest rates of car ownership in the world, with 70% of 18 to 24-year-olds owning one, and this proportion is even larger in other age groups. Obviously, the size of the country has a great deal to do with this, as does the cost to build and maintain public transport over such a large area. The trend is pretty much the same in Britain, though on a slightly smaller scale. This is to be expected as it is a much smaller country and suburbs and cities are connected by a fairly good network of trains and buses. 30% of 18 to 24-year-olds there have a car, and this increases to 50% for 25 to 32-year-olds. 65% of 32 to 40-year-olds own a car. Almost 100% of Americans in the 32 to 40 age group own a car, while approximately 88% of 18 to 24-year-olds do. There is no data currently available on the 25 to 32-year-old age group. Recent research has found that Germans and Austrians have almost the same percentage of ownership in each age group. The only difference is that the proportion of 32 to 40-year-olds in Germany is slightly larger at 79%. Perhaps the greatest change in car ownership figures in the last 15 years has come from developing countries. Almost 60% of Chinese people aged 32 to 40 now own cars, compared with 15% in 1998. The fastest growth in car ownership is found amongst the 18 to 24-year-olds in middle-class families. With 45% of 32 to 40-year-olds and 25% of 25 to 32-year-olds buying cars, Indian car ownership has shown the most dramatic change. Just over 10% of 18 to 24-year-olds now own a car, compared with just 1% 10 years ago. So what does the future hold? According to the latest projections,
that is the end of listening 5.4.
Section 4. You will hear a university lecturer giving a lecture about fast food consumption to a class of students. Before you listen, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, as you listen, answer questions 31 to 40.
Last week, we talked about diet, and in particular foods to avoid such as fast foods high in trans fats. Today, we're looking at fast food consumption and the problems associated with it. The consumption of fast food amongst middle-class people increased overall in most countries from 2001 to 2005. The vertical axis shows the number of meals per week, while the horizontal axis shows the countries. Japan has traditionally resisted the consumption of Western fast food, opting for healthier Japanese versions of ready-made meals. However, from the graph, you can see that by 2005, Japanese people were on average eating 5 fast food meals per week. This number is remaining stable. Fast food consumption remained the same from 2001 to 2003 in Korea, but increased to 4 meals a week in 2005. India showed similar results in 2001 and 2003, but even though there was an increase in 2005, it was somewhat smaller than Korea. People in England have always consumed a lot of fast food, but it used to be highest amongst people in lower socio-economic groups. However, from 2001 to 2003, there was quite a marked rise in the average amount of fast food consumed by middle-class people, and this continued to increase into 2005. In 2001, middle-class Australians consumed approximately 3 fast food meals per week, and this increased to 4 meals in 2003. Unfortunately, this number increased to 6 meals per week in 2005. The only country with worse results was the USA. With similar numbers to Australia in 2001 and 2003, consumption had shot up to 8 meals per week in 2005. What's really alarming about these figures are what they mean in relation to health. These levels of fast food consumption are doing nothing to help people's health, and health practitioners are seeing an increase in major health problems such as diabetes and heart disease in all age groups. Young people under the age of 25 are arguably the worst affected with diabetes and respiratory illnesses. Many young people are also experiencing difficulty with concentration and short-term memory loss. Amongst people in their mid-20s up to their early 50s, there's a high incidence of diabetes and cardiac problems. For people in their mid-50s and over, cardiac illness is also a problem, but contrary to popular belief, diabetes is not a major issue. As people's cognitive functioning is in danger of slowing down around this time of life, evidence is showing that fast food just worsens this. Let's move on to the effects of this on the health system.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of listening test 4. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.